This industrial complex is known as Shandong Yulong Petrochemical in Longkou, regarded as a nuclear power of northern China's economy. Located in Yulong Island, a man-made structure consisting of 7 reclaimed islands in Longkou City, Yulong Petrochemical is one of China's newest refineries, with a capacity of 400,000 barrels per day. Currently, this refinery is facing collective oil supply cut sanctions from international suppliers, finding itself isolated and cut off from the international crude oil market. Several sources familiar with the trade told Reuters that Yulong Petrochemical was recently added to the UK sanctions list due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Following the sanctions, several suppliers have cancelled agreements to sell Middle Eastern and Canadian oil to the company. Yulong Petrochemical is one of China's largest single buyers of Russian oil, and the sanctions imposed on it are part of the UK government's efforts to curb Russian revenues. A statement from the UK Foreign Office indicated that the measure is aimed at cutting off oil revenues that Moscow uses to fund its war in Ukraine and targeting entities that support Russia's war machine and circumventing existing sanctions. The sanctions have led international suppliers to end supply agreements, including European oil giant Total Energies, BP, Saudi state-owned oil company Aramco, Kuwait Petrochemical Corporation, as well as trading firms Trafigura and China National Petroleum Corporation. Sources stated that the decision to cancel contracts was driven by major Western banks, halting services to comply with sanctions regulations. This created significant risks in easing transactions with sanctioned entities. Due to a sharp reduction in access to non-sanctioned oil suppliers, Yulong Petrochemical will be forced to significantly increase its procurement from Russian suppliers. Analyst Sun Jiannan stated that there are reports of Yulong Petrochemical shifting towards mainly operating with sanctioned oil products. This could lead to a reduction in its refining capacity. This move may result in the following chain of consequences. 1. Increased financial isolation. Shifting to Russian oil will further isolate Yulong Petrochemical from major global banks and traders, raising transaction costs and uncertainties. 2. Secondary sanction risks. Although the UK's sanctions are not directly equivalent to those of the US or the EU, continuing substantial trade with sanctioned entities could trigger secondary sanctions from the US. This would cut off most of Yulong Petrochemical's access to the international financial system. 3. Challenges of following India's model. Reports indicate that India's Nayara Energy only imports oil from Russia after sanctions were imposed. However, this model comes at the cost of global trade relations. As a new refinery in China, Yulong Petrochemical's ability to seek long-term growth in international trade will be significantly constrained. Also sanctioned by the UK is another Chinese refinery, Liaoyang Petrochemical, as well as PetroChina's trading division, CNPC Hong Kong. Liaoyang Petrochemical, located in northeastern China with a production capacity of 200,000 barrels per day, is a comprehensive company involved in both refining and petrochemical businesses. It is also considered an important buyer of Russian crude oil. Together with Yulong Petrochemical, the total production capacity of these two refineries amounts to 600,000 barrels per day, representing 3% of China's total daily production capacity. As a trading division of PetroChina, CNPC Hong Kong plays a key role in the crude oil trade and has been recognized by the EU for its significant role in helping Russia secure fuel revenues. The EU stated that these 3 oil-related companies are significant buyers of Russian crude oil, thus providing substantial revenue sources to Moscow. On October 23rd, the EU officially approved the 19th round of sanctions against Russia. This is not the first time the EU has placed Chinese entities on its sanctions list, but the economic impact of this particular round of sanctions is the most far-reaching. The EU is currently working alongside the G7 to further deplete Russia's ability to fund the war in Ukraine by tightening critical oil and gas revenue streams. In addition to the oil companies, the EU also added Tianjin Xishan Fusheng International Trading Company from China to its sanctions list, stating that the company played a significant role in helping Russia circumvent sanctions. The EU indicated that the company exported EU-origin goods to Russian entities, goods that are prohibited from being exported directly from the EU to Russia. On October 23rd, a spokesperson from China's Ministry of Commerce expressed strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to the EU's sanctions on Chinese entities. Reuters reached out to CNPC, Yulong Petrochemical, Liaoyang Petrochemical, and Xishan Fusheng for comment, but they did not respond immediately. Earlier, on October 16th, the UK government had already announced sanctions against Russia's largest oil company and international firms supporting Putin's war, emphasizing that the move was aimed at expelling Russian oil from the international market. 11 entities from China and Hong Kong were included on the sanctions list. Russia's state-owned company and Lukoil are currently the two largest energy companies in the world, with a combined daily export of 3 million barrels of oil. The state-owned oil company alone accounts for 6% of global oil production, nearly half of Russia's total oil output. A statement noted that the UK government's 90 sanctions will enable Russian oil to withdraw from the market. This action highlights the government's determination to cut off Putin's revenue sources, targeting Russian companies and their global supporters, including 4 oil terminals in China, 44 shadow fleet tankers transporting Russian oil, and Indian company Nayara Energy Limited, which imported over $5 billion worth of 100 million barrels of Russian crude oil in 2024. All these entities are now subject to the latest round of sanctions. The 11 entities from China and Hong Kong on the list include 4 oil terminals and 1 LNG receiving station. Other Chinese and Hong Kong entities that have been sanctioned include Yiqing Xin Electronics Technology, Hongxi Microelectronics, Yijun Technology, Mingshan Electronics Technology, Shandong Baogang International Port, Shandong Haixin Port, and Shandong Jinggan Port. The UK also announced a ban on the import of oil products refined in third countries where the crude oil source is Russia. Additionally, sanctions were imposed on 7 liquefied natural gas tankers and China's national oil and gas pipeline group North Sea LNG Company. UK authorities pointed out that China's national oil and gas pipeline group North Sea LNG has never ceased importing natural gas from Russia's Arctic LNG 2 gas network. The UK has already sanctioned the Arctic LNG 2 project in February 2024, with its operations significantly reduced since then. The UK sanctions not only target oil, but also intensify efforts to disrupt Russia's critical military supply chains, focusing on companies providing key electronic components for drones and missiles to Russia, involving entities from China, Thailand, Turkey, Singapore, and other regions. On October 15th, UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper presented the sanctions proposal in Parliament, while the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, arrived in Washington, D.C. to attend the International Monetary Fund annual meetings. During her visit, she is scheduled to meet with G7 financial ministers and participate in roundtable discussions on Ukraine. Cooper stated, "At this critical moment for Ukraine, Europe is stepping up. Together, the UK and our allies are piling the pressure on Putin, going after his oil, gas, and shadow fleet. We will not relent until he abandons his failed war of conquest and gets serious about peace." Reeves stated, "We are sending a clear signal. Russian oil is off the market. As Putin's aggression intensifies, we are stepping up our response. The UK will continue to strip away the funding that fuels his war machine. We will hold to account all those enabling his illegal invasion of Ukraine." Analysts note that the UK's sanctions plan against Russia includes a large number of Chinese companies, reflecting the UK government's increasingly clear intention to target China, seen as a true power behind the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This also marks a significant counteraction to China's recent unchecked infiltration in the UK. The UK's policy towards China seems to be shifting dramatically, particularly with the return of President Trump to the White House. Recently, news of Prince Andrew renouncing his royal title has sparked heated discussion. It has also been revealed that Prince Andrew is closely linked to the CCP. On October 17, the BBC reported that Prince Andrew of the UK had renounced his royal titles, including that of Duke of York, following discussions with the King. Prince Andrew, the brother of King Charles, holds titles such as Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and Baron of Killyleagh. British historians have noted that this is the first time in centuries that a duke has lost his title. In a statement, Prince Andrew said, "In discussion with the King and my immediate and wider family, we have concluded the continued accusations about me distract from the work of His Majesty and the royal family. With His Majesty's agreement, we feel I must now go on a step further. I will therefore no longer use my title or the honors which have been conferred upon me." Historian Anthony Selden stated that the removal of Prince Andrew's title marks a decisive moment for the British royal family. He told BBC News that the last time a senior royal's ducal title was stripped was over 100 years ago. Selden explained, "That was in 1919 when one of Queen Victoria's grandsons, Prince Charles Edward, had his title of Duke of Albany revoked for fighting for Germany during World War I. From a historical perspective, this is a very, very significant move." Recently, the UK government has faced intense questioning following the withdrawal of the Chinese espionage case and approval of the Chinese super embassy. On October 16th, the Daily Mail revealed that Prince Andrew had met with Chinese spy chief Kai Chi at least 3 times. On December 16th, 2024, a UK court ruled that businessman Yang Tengbo, who had close ties with Prince Andrew for a decade, was a Chinese spy. Analysts pointed out that although Prince Andrew had been embroiled in a sexual scandal for years, it had never threatened his royal title. Selden's reference to the treasonous Duke of Albany, who collaborated with the enemy, bears uncanny resemblance to Prince Andrew in this case with his involvement with the Chinese Communist Party. The UK's actions sanctioning Chinese companies while targeting Russia signal a fundamental shift in its attitude towards the CCP, and this may just be the beginning. In contrast, the Trump administration's sanctions on Chinese companies were more aggressive. On September 12th, the US government issued a statement announcing sanctions against several Chinese tech companies and entities. This includes Chinese chip manufacturers that procure US chip-making equipment for SMIC, as well as high-tech companies with business ties to the Chinese military. The US Department of Commerce added 32 entities to the entity list, with 23 located in China. Other sanctioned companies are based in India, Iran, Singapore, Taiwan, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. These companies are involved in supporting the Chinese Communist Party's military and advanced computing developments. Information from the Federal Register reveals that Wuxi-based GMC Semitech and Shanghai-based Jikun Semiconductor Technology were added to the Commerce Department's entity list for assisting SMIC Northern Integrated Circuit Manufacturing and SMIC Integrated Circuit Manufacturing Beijing in procuring U.S. equipment. These 2 SMIC companies had previously been added to the entity list, and shipping U.S. equipment to them requires a license, which is highly likely to be denied. Shanghai Hudan Microelectronics Technology, a company engaged in the production of high-performance computing chips, along with its affiliated companies and other entities in mainland China, Singapore, and Taiwan, had also been added to the Commerce Department's blacklist. Several companies, including Beijing Hudan Microelectronics Technology, Shanghai Hudan Microelectronics, Shenzhen Hudan Microelectronics, and CSNC, were blacklisted for procuring or attempting to procure U.S. origin products to support the Chinese Communist Party's military modernization, involvement in distribution, advanced computing and integrated circuit manufacturing, and direct supply to the Chinese military, government, and security agencies. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, Shanghai Hudan Microelectronics Technology had also provided technology to military end users in Russia, which has led to additional restrictions being imposed on the company. Additionally, the U.S. Department of Commerce has added the Chinese Academy of Sciences National Time Service Center to the entity list, primarily for procuring and attempting to procure U.S. origin products to support the Chinese Communist Party's military and defense-related space activities, as well as China's quantum technology capabilities. Given the military applications of quantum technology, these actions are deemed to pose a significant threat to U.S. national security. The U.S. Department of Commerce has also included the Chinese Academy of Sciences Institute of Aerospace Information Research on the entity list due to its connections with the companies supporting the Chinese Communist Party's high-altitude balloon program. Shanghai Suochen Information Technology and Hong Kong Suochen Information Technology have also been added to the U.S. entity list for developing computer-aided engineering software for key customers of Chinese military-industrial enterprises. Beijing Tianyi Huiyan Biotechnology, Beijing Qingke Biotech, and Sangong Biotech have also been added to the U.S. entity list. The U.S. Department of Commerce stated that these entities assisted the Chinese Academy of Military Medical Sciences in using or transferring U.S. origin items posing unacceptable risks. On October 8th, the U.S. Department of Commerce issued another announcement, placing several Chinese companies on its export control blacklist. These companies were involved in purchasing U.S. electronic components, which were later found to be used in drones operated by Iranian proxies, such as Hamas and the Houthis. According to the BIS announcement, 16 Chinese companies and 3 Chinese addresses have been blacklisted. 10 Chinese companies were added to the U.S. Department of Commerce's export control blacklist for assisting Iranian proxies, such as the Houthis in Yemen, in purchasing components used in weaponizing drone systems. Another Chinese company was blacklisted for its involvement in an illegal procurement network that obtained and supplied parts, including drone components, to front companies of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Additionally, 5 Chinese companies were blacklisted because, around October 7, 2023, the Israeli Defense Forces recovered numerous armed drones operated by Iranian proxies such as Hamas and found several U.S.-origin electronic components inside. Investigations revealed that these entities helped procure and purchase some of these electronic components. The U.S. Department of Commerce has also added 3 addresses in China to its blacklist, which are linked to the procurement network of Emily Liu. Liu was sanctioned by the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control for providing support to the Iranian company Shiraz Electronics Industries. OFAC designated Shiraz Electronics Industries as being owned or controlled by the Iranian Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces Logistics. The companies on the blacklist are considered to pose a threat to U.S. national security and foreign policy interests. These entities must obtain a license before receiving products controlled under the U.S. Export Administration regulations, and such license applications will be reviewed under a presumption of denial, making approval highly unlikely. Experts have pointed out that the recent sanctions imposed by the U.S. on Chinese companies effectively amount to a high-tech embargo against the Chinese Communist Party, primarily targeting its military strategy. Meanwhile, the UK's sanctions on Chinese oil companies, besides coordinating with the US to weaken Russia's war capabilities on the Ukraine battlefield, also represent a precise strike at China's oil strategy. This person stated that China is severely lacking in crude oil, yet its refinery resources are abundant, surpassing the US last year to become the world's largest refining capacity. When crude oil is in surplus, refineries make the highest profits, as they can lower raw material costs while maintaining higher prices for the refined products, such as gasoline and diesel. The Chinese government has long been stockpiling oil and gas resources. Given the current geopolitical tensions, crude oil represents a significant strategic vulnerability for the Chinese Communist Party. Maintaining high oil prices and ensuring profitability for state-owned oil companies is crucial to the CCP's political security, with large stockpiles of oil and gas being a primary means to sustain high prices. If Beijing's oil stockpiling plans are disrupted, oil prices would naturally fall, and Russia's economy would be on the verge of collapse. Additionally, if sanctioned Chinese refineries rely solely on Russian crude oil imports, they will not only face complex related sanctions, but also the risk of Russia's energy base being targeted by Ukraine's increasingly enhanced long-range strike capabilities. Moreover, purchasing only Russian crude oil would have far less impact on boosting international oil prices compared to global procurement. Currently, Ukraine is focused on targeting Russian crude oil production while cutting off the CCP's channels for oil stockpiling. This strategy prevents oil prices from rising due to restricted Russian crude exports, maximizing the impact on Russia's economy and effectively undermining Putin's war efforts. This method of interconnected sanctions is highly efficient, and once the Russia-Ukraine war ends, the CCP, without its strategic buffer, will likely collapse as well. The coordinated attacks by the US and the UK across different sectors demonstrate perfect alignment and synergy. This is a victory for the free world, but a nightmare for the Chinese Communist Party.